In the early 90s, a research I was doing in a hemp fiber took me back to my village, deep in the Apuseni mountain of Romania. And the woman I interviewed there told me an indirectly related story. Her husband constantly abused her. So she threatened him that when he will die, she will dance dressed in red. That day came, and the woman, dressed in her red skirt, locked herself in the cellar where nobody could see her and dance. A textile dyed red was this woman's revenge. Textiles are people companions since always, fulfilling their needs for emotions, for ritual, beauty, and practicalities, of course. And textiles were at the core of my life since my childhood and were intertwining always with my metamorphosis. And this is a story I will share with you today. Textiles are made during the history, were made for the rich people by the best craftsmen. And from best material they found around themselves, around the area they live, or they were imported. But textile, for the ordinary people, people of modest wealth, were made by themselves, for them and for their families. With the material they found around themselves, and they produced them, and also with elements of symbol and beauty that were perfected by generations. So this relates, yes, to my story. I'm one of those people who traveled around the world and setting out on a journey from the same place when I now came back. I had a happy childhood in Herzegan village, and during which I was fortunate to observe my mom performance of textile production, home textile production, from which I learned, and I fell in love with textiles. So this was really my starting point. And soon enough, when I grew up, I got curious about what would be beyond my immediate landscape. So that curiosity brought me further and further from home. First, my high school years were in Deva City, and then I went to Bucharest to study at the University of Art, Tapestry and Textile Structure. I got married in Bucharest, and my husband's job took me to Mauritania. All those moves happened during the restrictive communist era. The political refugee situation that my husband's family beheld because of my father-in-law, Florica Zaharia, who wrote a historic novel called Ademenire, The Temptation, took us first to Spain and then in 1988 to New York. There, in need of a steady job, I was fortunate indeed to be hired by the Department of Textile Conservation at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We felt very much in love with the country, and my family and I, we felt at home in New York, but our roots always called us back. So now, within a democratic political system in Romania, we decided to come back. And yes, indeed, we did, and we came back to the same place where I started my journey. So that happened after 28 years of being in New York, by the way. My journey was, although not always easy, it was always an exciting one and continued to be an exciting one, simply because my interest of knowing what is behind my comfort zone, and also because of my passion for textiles. So I was talking a little bit earlier about the textile that wealthier people got and the normal people, mostly living in a rural area, got. But how about our textiles today? Our textiles do not carry cultural context or very rarely we have cultural context in a textile we are wearing. They're just helping us being comfortable and presenting ourselves and our living spaces to people around us. But because they are produced industrially and they're therefore easily replaceable, we rarely or almost never treasure them. We never give them to the next generation. The textile I grew up with, the textile of my childhood, and my ancestors' knowledge transmitted to me, to my mom, Victoria Trippen by the name, it's her name, were different. I was fortunate to experience the love for the textile, which I know I could relate to the person they did it. I knew the environment they were created. And also, I know they carry elements that relates me to my ancestors. Most of those textiles are today in the museums. But those textiles of my childhood really form a foundation for my profession. At the beginning as a textile artist, then as a textile conservator, and now managing my own museum and curating exhibition and so on. They carry elements of symbols and beauty that indeed relates to my ancestors. So we treasure them, my family treasure them. We don't treasure, as I said today, our textiles simply because they don't carry any information that could help us connect to the past. So during my journey, there are many questions that I had. Some of them I could answer, others not. Many questions were related with my textile heritage and their relation to the world heritage. For example, how can we explain the identity of Romanian textile and what is their place in the global context? Are the textiles produced almost anonymously in the rural country having the same importance with the textile produced by well-known craftsmen? When does a textile become art, for example? Those are questions difficult for me to answer while I was living in Romania before the immigration, simply because my access to the textile made outside Romania were very limited. I really started finding responses to my question while working at the Metropolitan Museum with its outstanding textile collection that span over 5,000 years and comes from a different country and different cultures. The beauty of being conservators at the Met, especially textile conservator, is the complexity of the job. A conservator is really performing research of textile. It's performing conservation and restoration, of course, installation of the exhibition, preparation of objects for the exhibition. In the latest years, we even curate exhibition, which is a job of a curator, but we have enough information to share in an exhibition, which is great. We have a privilege of working with an outstanding group of professionals, which are the museum staff. Everything seems there. Our colleagues from Romania, when they visit, they call us the Met Factory, indeed. It's incredible. So you really find a lot of answer to that. When I was right at the Met, I was hired with the title of restorer. That is a lesser title of conservator's title that Met has at the time. That title doesn't exist anymore. Why was that? Because I didn't speak English and I didn't have a formal training in conservation. But I was fascinated with the work, so I moved ahead with our titles, and the rewards came unnoticeable almost. And eventually, in 15 years, I was invited to head the Department of Textile Conservation. Leading the department gave me the opportunity to work with the institution management team, which gave me another level of experience and gave me the confidence to do what I'm doing today, starting a museum of my own. you parallel with learning at the Met, which is an enormous plus, I was learning from collecting. My husband and I started collecting during the student years. And of course, first we collected Romanian textiles. They were in our hand, and we looked always at the beauty and the technique that intrigued us. But later, and soon enough, in fact, after our emigration, we were curious to learn about other culture and to learn about our textile place in the world. So we really expanded our collection to pieces from other cultures. And the idea was to form a reference collection that would help us contextualize the Romanian textiles. And sure, that happened soon enough, so our collection became larger and larger. And the question is, what do you do with a collection relatively large, and yet with the knowledge that I gain in one of the foremost cultural institutions in the world? It seems like the best idea is to open a museum, and why not? And not an ordinary museum, a museum where we can build a reference collection, again, where the Romanian textile could be seen in a global context. And to have a cultural institution where scholars and students and even people who worked in their youth, especially in the home textile production, could interact and could participate to the study of the traditional textile. And not only the Romanian people, but people from other countries. And yet to help creating that bridge between our culture, the culture of our country and the rest of the world. So I have to bring you one of my favorite pieces that I collected during the early 90s. That was a time after the Romanian Revolution when we finally could come back home. And one day I was visiting the open vegetable market in Neva City that happened in 1992. At that time, the market was not modernized, and people were simply standing behind their textile coming from all over the country and selling them. And here was this beautiful textiles, which was a wall hanging covering a huge pile of melons. And they were coming from the Calafat area, which is south of Romania. I was very happy to save this textile made of dyed wool. Otherwise, it would have been deteriorated very fast under the strong summer sun. It is today in our collection and one of my favorite pieces. So, as I said, yes, the idea was to have a museum, and not in Bucharest, not in other city, not in New York, but in a place where I have my childhood. And the museum has 3 locations. Why 3 locations? Because they complement each other, and this way we can participate to save the architecture of local importance as well. Building A and B are in Băița, which is the center, administrative center of our area. Building A, it is in a 19th century house, which is yet to be restored, so it's not open to the public today. But the building B, which is also in Băița, and housed in the general, former building of a general store, and the building C in Herțăgani, they're functioning today. And by the way, all those buildings we saved from demolition or decay. So our museum, although it's a young institution, is already fulfilling or showing sign of fulfilling the institution mission through program of research projects and exhibitions and other activities in which we're including people from our country and from all over the world, which gives us a satisfaction of having at least part of our mission accomplished. I was having a cup of coffee while waiting in the airport on my way to New York, and just finding myself watching people passing nearby. And suddenly I was astonished, thinking how much fun we have today with our clothes. The elderly are wearing ripped jeans that teenager wears. The rich people have holes in their shoes. Almost everybody can wear black for breakfast, and yet no one feels out of line. We really feel you live happily, a liberation from the strict rules that guided the use of color, the use of materials, and the style, and much more, which were hard in people to behave by them. Yet those strict rules stimulated an outstanding artistic creation. From the famous, well-known Flemish tapestry made for kings and emperors, depicting their victories and conquest, to the wall hanging and coverlets made in the rural areas, full of symbols and beauty. We must look back to those creations and let ourselves be inspired by them. And certainly, we should remember that red skirt that helped a long time humiliated woman forgive without violence, without anger and pain, and in deep spirituality.